340 million. That's how many times one true crime podcast has now been downloaded. Hello, I'm Matthew Price. This is Beyond Today from BBC Radio 4, where we ask one question about one story every day. Today, how ethical is true crime?
When you are working on a case that you think is a wrongful conviction, you're only on one side, and that side is getting to the truth.
This is a pretty big moment for fans of true crime. Sky and HBO are releasing their 4-part mega series, The Case Against Adnan Syed. And if you are one of the 340 million people who downloaded the original telling of this story on the Serial podcast, then it's bound to be a must-watch.
Now, 18 years after he was sent to prison, convicted murderer Adnan Syed heads back to court as questions about his case continue to surface.
Adnan Syed is the man who arguably kick-started our true crime addiction. Serial examined in minute detail his story, the story of the murder he was convicted of, the killing of an American high school student, his ex-girlfriend, Hae Min Lee, back in 1999. Serial's podcast wasn't just a massive commercial success. It also threw doubts on the case and more widely on the US justice system as a whole. And it created true crime as a type of entertainment which the big production houses are pumping out as fast as they can. This month there's the Ted Bundy film with Zac Efron. Last month there was the Netflix documentary about Madeleine McCann. And it was Netflix that gave us another true crime hit, Making a Murderer, the story of Steven Avery, which is where one of our journalists, Kelly Lee Cooper, who says she watches far too much of this stuff, it's where she decided to start her investigation into whether all of this is just harmless fun or something a bit more sinister.
Steven Avery spent 18 years in prison for something he didn't do.
18 years.
18 years.
I went up to Manitowoc, which is a name that's notorious around the world because it's where the whole making a murderer thing happened.
Penny Bernstein was everything that Steven wasn't. So just think of the two of them side by side.
There was no real investigation done by the sheriff's department.
The sheriff told the DA not to screw this case up. He wanted Avery.
It was kind of an industrial little city, but it was also quite quaint and quite pretty, and that's not really what I was expecting. Before I went there, I was sending loads of emails to the mayor and other local officials, and nobody wanted to speak to me about this. Nobody wants to talk about this case. They hate being known for this story.
The truth always comes out.
You're going there because it's sort of, for you, it's the ground zero of true crime.
Yeah, I mean, I think the huge explosion in popularity we've seen largely kind of came from the Making a Murderer phenomenon back in 2015.
So, as far as people are concerned there, how do they feel about Making a Murderer?
For them, this is something that happened 15 years ago. They don't want to talk about it. It's something that they haven't thought about for years. And now media from all around the world come to talk about this case. And they find it really weird. They don't get it. They hate it. They don't want to be known for it. Everyone I spoke to was very keen to point out that this happened miles outside of town. You know, it's got nothing to do with us, sort of thing. And they just want the world to know that there's so much more than that. You know, that doesn't reflect who they are as a community.
It's almost like they sort of had to live through the reality, and now they have to live just the reality keeps popping up. They're reminded of it all the time.
Yeah, and I spoke to a guy who has a friend who's in the local police force, and he's had to delete all his social media accounts because he gets death threats and abuse from around the world from people who have seen this show and think they understand the story and, you know, lay blame at people in the community. And if you search it on social media, there's like a lot of people trolling the local community, local officials.
Hundreds of thousands of people are calling for the pardon of a convicted killer after the Netflix series Making a Murderer exposed possible flaws in the case that put him behind bars.
Apparently the police has actually hired an extra member of staff just to moderate their Facebook page because of how much abuse they get from around the world.
A sheriff's office made famous by a Netflix documentary says they've received a bomb threat. Manitowoc police say a caller made the threat last night, warning there was a bomb in the sheriff's office building and a vehicle in the parking lot packed.
If you go on Instagram, you can see that people literally drive to Stephen Avery's property.
Touchdown. We're here on Avery Road.
Just to get selfies with his sign.
Where they found remains. It's just a little odd.
And they're excited about that.
Yeah, I spoke to people who went there as tourists and they loved it. They were really happy for me to put this photograph in my news story about it.
What were they getting out of it? Why were they there?
They just kind of see it as like, they said, well, we were in Wisconsin, so we had to come here, you know? And their captions, it's all like, well, did he do it? It's very rural, and I actually got a taxi driver to drive me out to the property where the alleged murder happened. And
what did the taxi driver say when you asked to go there?
She rang her son and was like, just so you know, I'm going to that property in case anything happens. Like,
really?
Yeah, she was like, she thought it was really funny, but she said, you know, the community's really struggled, and there's been a lot of like infighting in the community or...
Because of?
The show.
Yeah.
Because some people think he's innocent, some people think he did it. And most in the community have kind of buried their head in the sand and sort of hope that this story will just go away. But there's already been a series 2, there's talk of a series 3. They just don't want to talk about this.
It's frustrating to be represented by an anomaly. You know, that anomaly doesn't represent who this community is or all of the positive things that are happening here. The name Manitowoc means home of the Great Spirit.
So from Manitowoc, where they are kind of really struggling with how to deal with being involved in such a notorious crime, I went about an hour and a half down the road back to Milwaukee. Milwaukee is where Jeffrey Dahmer picked up a lot of his victims.
Jeffrey Dahmer's murderous orgy is over. Throughout the trial that found him sane, grief-stricken families of the 15 men and boys Dahmer killed and mutilated held their peace.
Dahmer was arrested in 1991, and he eventually admitted to killing 17 boys and young men.
I didn't ever want freedom. Frankly, I wanted death for myself. This was a case to tell the world that I did what I did not for reasons of hate. I hated no one. I knew I was sick or evil or both. Now I believe I was sick.
And he was involved in all sorts of really gross stuff. He was into cannibalism, that type of thing. So it's a really horrendous case.
I should have stayed with God. I tried and failed and created a Holocaust. And if I could give my life right now to bring their loved ones back, I would do it. I am so very sorry. I deserve whatever I get because of what I have done.
They're actually turning it into a business.
One of Milwaukee's darkest chapters now being reopened tonight, and some are not happy about it.
There's a guy in the city. He runs the Cream City Cannibal Tour.
What?
And basically...
I shouldn't laugh. So what's its title again?
The Cream City Cannibal Tour.
Cream City Cannibal Tour.
And it allows people...
Milwaukee is what? Its nickname is the Cream
Cream
City.
City.
Colleen Henry reports on the new walking tour offering Jeffrey Dahmer history at a discount.
I've done the tour before, but I am here with a friend who said that they were doing this tonight, so we decided to come back out.
It promises people that they can go in the footsteps of Dahmer along the streets where he picked up his victims.
It's not nice, I suppose, but the details are sometimes kind of fun, too.
We just came here for the regular ghost tour, so we're excited to check that out because he's a local legend a little bit in a bad way, but a little bit of a legend.
I love the Jeffrey Dahmer tour. I think it's more of a way of remembering the victims instead of them being forgotten. And so it's not just about Jeffrey Dahmer, but it's also about the victims and who they were.
Did you do it?
I did. It was snowing and it was raining, and it was one of the strangest experiences of my life. So there was like 12 of us, so it was quite a quiet tour for them. At peak season, they can get like 100 people a day taking this tour. And we were all crowded with umbrellas, and we were just walking up and down this quite industrial, quite creepy area as someone explained all these disgusting things that he did. What's crazy is a lot of the people on this tour are a bit like me. They're these like true crime mega fans, but like a lot worse than me. There was a couple who were there on their anniversary. That was their anniversary date.
How much do you pay for this tour?
I think it was like $20.
Okay, so that's quite a good income for the... How long is it?
An hour and a half.
Okay, that's not bad bit work for a day. Do it a few times. That's a lot of money.
And people who go on the tour get a $5 discount for a Jeffrey Dahmer t-shirt.
And what's on the t-shirt?
The t-shirt has a mugshot of him with Milwaukee Cannibal, and on the back it says 17, like a sports jersey, and that's the amount of people he killed. The owner who runs these tours, I sort of challenged him on this, because when the tour started, there was some protests from victims' families, because these crimes happened in living memory. This isn't like Jack the Ripper. This didn't happen decades ago. And he believes that the tour has educational value, historical value. He thinks, it teaches life lessons to people on how to look after themselves. But I said to him, how do you reconcile that with selling t-shirts? Like, that seems weird to me. And he doesn't see the problem. It's 30 years since Ted Bundy was executed, and you might know this because he seems to be everywhere this year. There was a big documentary series.
He didn't look like anybody's notion of somebody who would tear apart young girls.
My name is Ted Bundy. I've never spoken to anybody about this.
There's a new movie coming out starring Zac Efron.
The media has convicted Ted before he's had his day in court.
I'm gagged, and you're not.
I wonder whether he did it or not.
A lot of people, when that trailer came out, said, this is romanticizing him.
Did you do these things?
Absolutely not.
What about, these women that this man killed? What about those people? So I went and actually found a woman called Kathy Kleiner. She was at the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University.
Somebody came into our room. I heard him crack the door open, and I heard him trip over the trunk, and things fell off the trunk, so getting more awake now.
She survived a really horrendous attack by Ted Bundy back in 1978.
And as I opened my eyes, I saw the silhouette of somebody standing over me with the club and lifting the club up with his arm and bringing it down and hitting me. And I remember, my jaw was shattered. And I remember in my mind I was screaming and asking for help, and all I could do was moan. And in my head I was screaming for help. It was kind of surreal.
She's not really spoken much about this for a number of decades, but this year she got tracked down, and I had a conversation with her about what it's like to be a victim of someone so famous and so notorious, and seeing him everywhere on TV shows, in movies. Did that make her uncomfortable? That type of thing.
What did she say?
It's an odd one. So she said for her, she found that reading about Bundy kind of empowered her in a way. It made her feel like she had knowledge over him and power over him, because she was made so powerless in his attack. But she said, if she was a family member of someone who died, she can't imagine how they live through this glamorization in certain shows.
And had it done anything to her psychologically, the fact that he is everywhere at the moment? He is on TV, he is in magazines.
She sort of dealt with the emotional trauma of this for decades. She was really scared of men for a while. She was, you know, she's overcome so many things. So for her now, it's almost like it's been so long ago. It's 40 years ago. But she just sees it as an actor playing a part. You know, people may say that we're glamorizing Bundy by having someone like Zac Efron play him. But that's the image that Bundy put across. Like, he was very charming. He was very all-American, you know, attractive guy. And that's how he managed to get so many victims, because he didn't look like what you'd perceive a dangerous person to look.
Did you expect her to have that reaction?
So she actually found out that they were making this movie, and she tried to reach out to the studio. Like, hi, I'm a Bundy survivor. Like, I can give you first-hand experience. And she never heard anything back. So, I mean, she assumes it just kind of got lost in an email somewhere. But it raises larger questions whether, you know, if these cases are getting made into things, whether we should be speaking to victims' families.
And perhaps this is the whole point. Do the makers of these programs try to talk to the victims and the victims' families? Should they try to contact them? We started this episode with the case of Adnan Syed. The director says they did try to involve the family of Syed's victim, Hae Min Lee, but they didn't want to be a part of it.
They've not really spoken a lot publicly, but when they have, they've said they don't want this case and these feelings dragged up decades later. And they really hate that there's people on the internet who think they're experts and talk about their daughter like it's some kind of, you know, amateur sleuths kind of getting involved, thinking they can solve the case. For them, this is really difficult.
It is difficult, isn't it? Because you take something that's so personal to them and you make it this massive public phenomenon. Do you think true crime is ethical?
I think a lot of it isn't, but it's addictive and it's good TV. And that's where we're at the moment. And I think that's a problem.
Thank you to Kelly Lee Cooper. Kelly's article is now online on the BBC website. Philly Beaumont and Seren Jones produced and Nico Rofas mixed. And you can get us, of course, on BBC Sounds. Please subscribe there. Thanks for listening. See you.